Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. They say the mind sees patterns where none exist, faces in clouds, messages in tea leaves. But I know what I saw that October evening in Cedar Rapids wasn't my imagination, because 37 other people saw it too. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to do something for me. Right now. Look out your window. Are there birds on the power lines? Count them. Remember the number. It matters more than you think. And if you're watching this at night, well, that's when they practice. Drop a comment below with how many birds you counted. I promise you'll understand why by the end of this story. And trust me, you'll never look at a flock of starlings the same way again. The story begins now. I'd been driving for 12 hours straight when I pulled into Cedar Rapids. The October sun hung low, painting everything in that peculiar orange light that makes the world look like an old photograph. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. My back screamed from the cheap seats in my beat-up Honda Civic, and all I wanted was a hot shower and a bed that didn't smell like truck stop coffee. The Riverside Inn sat just off Highway 30. Nothing fancy, just your standard two-story motel with peeling paint and a flickering vacancy sign. Perfect for someone running from, well, let's just say I needed to be somewhere my ex-wife's lawyer couldn't find me for a few days. I was hauling my duffel bag from the trunk when I first noticed them. The birds, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, swirling above the motel parking lot like smoke from an invisible fire. Starlings, I think. Those little black birds that seem to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Beautiful, really, the way they moved together, like a single organism with 1,000 hearts. I'd seen murmurations before on nature documentaries, but never in person. Never this close. First time seeing the evening show? I nearly dropped my bag. An older woman stood behind me, appeared out of nowhere like she'd materialized from the autumn air itself. She wore a faded Iowa State University sweatshirt and had the kind of smile that made you trust her immediately, even though something in her eyes suggested you shouldn't. "Sorry," I managed. She pointed up. "The birds. They've been doing this every evening for, 3 weeks now? Started right after the Hendricks family moved away. Strange timing, if you ask me." I looked back at the swirling mass of birds. They moved like liquid, flowing and reforming, creating shapes that almost looked like... Did they just... I stopped myself. Couldn't say it out loud, couldn't admit what I thought I'd seen. The woman's smile widened. "You saw it too, didn't you? Don't worry. You're not crazy. Well, not yet anyway." She extended a hand. "Margaret Chen, I run the diner across the street. You look like you could use a hot meal and some answers." I shook her hand, noticed how cold her fingers were despite the warm evening. "Jake Morrison. And yeah, I could eat." "Room first," she said, nodding toward the motel office. "Then come find me at Maggie's Diner. Order the meatloaf special." "And Jake?" She leaned in close enough that I could smell peppermint on her breath. "Whatever you do, don't watch them after midnight. That's when they practice the real messages." She walked away before I could ask what she meant, leaving me standing in the parking lot with my bag in one hand and a growing sense of unease in my stomach. Above me, the birds continued their dance, and for just a moment, I swear they formed letters in the sky, H-E-L, but then they scattered, became just birds again, and I convinced myself I'd imagined it. The motel clerk was a kid, couldn't have been more than 19, with acne scars and eyes that never quite met mine. He handed me a key attached to a plastic tag shaped like a corn cob. "Room 237, second floor, end of the hall. "You here for the festival?" he asked, fingers drumming nervously on the counter. "What festival?" He blinked, confused. "The, Harvest Festival? Starts tomorrow? Whole town's been preparing for weeks." He leaned forward, dropped his voice. "Though, between you and me, something feels different this year, ever since the birds started their thing. Their thing, you know." He made a swirling motion with his finger. "The skywriting. Started 3 weeks ago, same time every evening, 6:47 p.m., like clockwork. My mom says it's just coincidence, pattern recognition. But I took a video last Tuesday and..." He glanced around the empty lobby, then pulled out his phone. "Want to see?" I did. God help me, I did want to see. He fumbled with his phone, pulled up a video, and turned the screen toward me. The quality was grainy, shaky, but clear enough. The birds swirled and dove, formed shapes, and then WATCH, clear as day. The word hung in the sky for maybe 3 seconds before dissolving back into chaos. "That's..." I couldn't finish. "Yeah," the kid said, "and that's not even the weirdest part. Every night, the message is different. Monday was soon, Tuesday was watch, Wednesday was prepare, Thursday..." He swallowed hard. "Thursday, they spelled out names." Names? Local people. Mrs. Patterson from the library. Jim Crawford, who owns the hardware store. The entire Hendricks family. He put his phone away. Those were the ones who left town. Said they were moving for work, but Jim's owned that hardware store for 30 years. Why would he suddenly leave? A chill ran down my spine. "What happened Friday?" The kid's face went pale. "Friday, they didn't form words. They formed numbers, coordinates, latitude and longitude, led to the old Riverside Cemetery. And nobody was stupid enough to go check it out." He handed me my receipt. "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Morrison, and, maybe keep your curtains closed tonight." I took the key and headed for the stairs, but stopped at the door. "Hey, kid, what's your name?" Tommy Chen." "Chen, any relation to Margaret at the diner?" His face darkened. "She's my grandmother, and if she invited you to dinner, well, just be careful what questions you ask. Grandma Maggie knows things. Things about this town, about the birds, about what happened here in 1987. What happened in 1987? But Tommy had already turned away, busying himself with paperwork that probably didn't need doing. I left him to it and climbed the stairs to room 237, each step feeling heavier than the last. The room was exactly what you'd expect. 2 double beds with comforters that had seen better decades. A TV bolted to the dresser. A painting of a barn that looked like it came from a garage sale. But it was clean. And it was quiet. And right then, that's all I needed. I dropped my bag on the bed nearest the window and pulled back the curtain. The birds were still there, still dancing. But now, they moved with more purpose, more intent. I watched them form shapes, letters, partial words that dissolved before I could read them. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop watching. A.M. Margaret." Had to be. But how did she get my number? I hadn't given it to anyone. Another buzz. "Seriously, Jake, close the curtains. Shower. Come eat. 30 minutes. I looked back at the birds. They'd formed a perfect circle now, hovering in place like they were waiting for something. In the center of the circle, a smaller group began to move, began to spell. JAKE. I yanked the curtains closed so hard the rod nearly came off the wall. 30 minutes. I could shower and change in 30 minutes. Could walk across the street to Maggie's diner and get some answers. Could pretend this was all just small-town weirdness and coincidence. But as I stood under the lukewarm spray of the shower, I couldn't shake the feeling that the birds knew my name, knew I was here, knew something I didn't. And somewhere in the distance, barely audible over the sound of running water, I heard them calling. Not bird sounds, not chirps or caws or songs. Words, whispered on 1,000 wings. He's here. He's finally here, the one who can read the whole message. I turned the water as hot as it would go, but I couldn't stop shivering. Maggie's diner looked like it hadn't changed since the 50s. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, and a jukebox in the corner playing Roy Orbison. The kind of place where the coffee was always hot and the pie was always fresh and everyone knew everyone else's business. It was also completely empty except for Margaret Chen, who sat in the corner booth with 2 cups of coffee already waiting. "Right on time," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "I took the liberty of ordering for you. Meatloaf special, like I suggested. Coffee black, no sugar. You strike me as a no-sugar kind of man." She was right. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, grateful for something solid to hold on to. "How did you get my phone number?" "Tommy gave it to me from your registration." She sipped her coffee, eyes never leaving mine. "You're wondering about the birds." "I'm wondering about a lot of things, but mostly the birds." She smiled. That same unsettling smile from the parking lot. Everyone wonders about the birds at first. Then they wonder about the town. Then they wonder about themselves. It's a progression. "Look, Mrs. Chen." "Maggie, please." "Maggie, I'm just passing through. Whatever's going on here with your birds and your mystery messages, it's got nothing to do with me." She laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, Jake, if that were true, they wouldn't have spelled your name." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "You saw that?" "I see everything that happens in this town. Have to. Someone needs to keep watch." She pulled out an old leather journal, pages yellowed with age. "This belonged to my mother, and her mother before that. 4 generations of Chen women, all watching, all recording, all waiting." "Waiting for what?" She flipped through the pages, past pressed flowers and faded photographs and handwritten notes in what looked like Chinese. Stopped at an entry dated October 15th, 1987. "Read this," she said, sliding the journal across the table. The handwriting was delicate, precise. The birds came again tonight, more than ever before. They spelled out the message completely for the first time. "The door opens when the watcher reads. Mother says it means nothing. Says I'm seeing patterns where none exist, but I know better. The birds don't lie. They're trying to warn us. Or prepare us. Or..." The entry cut off mid-sentence. The next several pages had been torn out. "What happened to the rest?" I asked. "My mother destroyed them. Said some knowledge was too dangerous to preserve." Maggie took the journal back. Handled it like a holy relic. 3 days after she wrote that entry, 17 people disappeared from Cedar Rapids. Just vanished. No bodies, no notes, no explanation. The official story was a gas leak at the factory where they all worked. Mass casualties. Bodies never recovered. But I was there. I saw what really happened. The waitress appeared with my food, a mountain of meatloaf and mashed potatoes that smelled like heaven but turned my stomach. She was young, maybe Tommy's age, with the same Chen cheekbones and the same watchful eyes. "Thanks, Lily," Maggie said. "You can lock up after you finish the dishes. I'll close out the register." Lily nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. We were alone again. "Eat," Maggie commanded. "You'll need your strength." I took a bite. It was perfect, like everything else about this place. Too perfect. So, what really happened in 1987? The birds formed the complete message. The door opens when the watcher reads. And someone, some fool, read it aloud. She leaned back, eyes distant with memory. I was 12 years old, standing right outside this diner with my mother. The birds were everywhere that night, more than we'd ever seen. They filled the sky like a black carpet. And then they began to form words, sentences, paragraphs, An entire story written in living ink across the Iowa sky. What kind of story? The kind that changes things. The kind that opens doors that should stay closed. She reached across the table, grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. They're doing it again, Jake. Building up to the full message. That's why people are leaving. The smart ones, anyway. They remember 1987. Remember the 17 who never came home? I pulled my hand away. Why are you telling me this? Why not just leave town yourself? Because someone has to watch. Someone has to witness. And because... She hesitated. First time I'd seen her uncertain. Because I think you're the watcher they've been waiting for. That's insane. Is it? You saw your name in the sky. You came here tonight instead of hiding in your room. You're listening to me instead of running. She pulled out her phone, showed me a video. This was last night, 11:59 p.m., 1 minute before they usually stop. The video was clearer than Tommy's. Professional quality, the birds moved in perfect synchronization, forming words faster than before. The watcher comes from the east, bearing the weight of broken promises. He reads the sky with desperate eyes and opens what the faithful closed. My coffee mug slipped from numb fingers, shattered on the floor. I'd driven here from the east, from Chicago, running from broken promises to my ex-wife, from the divorce papers I couldn't bring myself to sign, from a life that had fallen apart so completely I'd gotten in my car and just driven. Coincidence, I whispered. Keep watching, Maggie said. The birds in the video swirled, reformed. Room 237 holds the first key the watcher must choose by dawn. Read the whole message or run both paths lead to truth. They knew, I said. They knew my room number before I even checked in. They know everything, Jake. Past, present, future. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I stood up so fast the booth shook. I'm going to do what any sane person would do. I'm going to get in my car and drive until I hit California. Maybe Hawaii. Somewhere without birds. There are birds everywhere, Jake. Then I'll find somewhere without sky. She didn't try to stop me as I headed for the door, but her voice followed me, calm and certain. You can run. Others have, but the message will find you. It always finds the watcher. And when it does, when you finally read the whole thing, remember that we tried to warn you. Remember that you had a choice. I paused at the door. What's in room 237? What's the first key? I don't know. The rooms change, the keys change. Only the watcher can find them. She started cleaning up the broken mug. Movements slow and careful. But Jake, if you do decide to look, don't do it alone. The doors that open, sometimes they're hungry. I left without another word, stepped out into the October night, and froze. The parking lot was full of birds, hundreds of them, perched on cars, on power lines, on the motel roof, all silent, all watching, all waiting, and in the middle of them all, written in seeds and breadcrumbs on the asphalt, a single word, choose. I ran. Sprinted across the street to the motel, took the stairs 3 at a time. Fumbled with my key at the door to 237. The birds didn't follow. They didn't need to. They knew I'd be back. Inside my room, everything looked normal. Bed still made, TV still bolted down, painting still crooked on the wall, but there was something on my pillow that hadn't been there before. An old brass key with a tag attached. The tag had a single word written in handwriting I recognized from Maggie's journal. Remember, I picked up the key, felt its weight, noticed how warm it was, like someone had been holding it, like it had been waiting. Outside my window, the birds began to gather again, began to swirl, began to write, and God help me. I pulled back the curtains to read what they had to say. The birds moved differently now, with purpose, with intent. They formed words faster than my eyes could follow. sentences that hung in the air just long enough to read before dissolving into the next. The watcher holds the key, but keys without doors are merely metal. Look behind what seems solid, find where yesterday hides from tomorrow. I read it 3 times before it faded. Cryptic nonsense, or so I tried to tell myself, but the key in my hand grew warmer, and I found myself turning to look at the crooked painting on the wall. The barn. Always barns in these motel rooms, like some unwritten rule of Middle American decor. I lifted it off its hook, and my breath caught. There was a door, not a real door, but a painted one. Someone had painted a small door directly onto the wall, complete with hinges and a keyhole. The paint looked fresh, wet even, but that was impossible. I touched it. My finger came away red. Not paint. Blood, still warm. The key in my hand pulsed like a heartbeat. Outside, the birds screamed. Not bird sounds, human sounds. 17 different voices all crying out at once. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Don't do it," Tommy's voice, panicked, breathless. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. I'm coming up. Just wait for me, please." "Tommy, what's going on? What is this?" "It's a test, the first test. The door isn't real, but what comes through it is. My grandmother. She didn't tell you everything. The 17 people who disappeared? They didn't vanish. They became something else. Something the birds used to." The line went dead, not disconnected. Dead. Like the phone had never existed. I looked at the painted door again. The keyhole seemed deeper now. 3-dimensional. Like I could actually insert the key. A knock at my door. Soft, hesitant. "Mr. Morrison, it's Tommy. Can you let me in?" I moved toward the door, then stopped. Tommy's voice had come from the hallway, but I could see his reflection in the dark TV screen. He was standing right behind me. I spun around, nothing there. Just the painted door, which now showed signs of opening. A crack of light seeping through the edges. Something moving behind it. Another knock. Louder. "Jake?" Maggie's voice now. "Don't let him in. That's not Tommy." But her voice came from inside the room. From the painted door, from whatever was trying to push through. I backed against the window, trapped between 2 impossibilities. The birds outside had formed words again. Choose correctly or join the 17. The real Tommy has no shadow. The real Maggie speaks in 3s, count carefully, watcher. The knocking stopped. Both doors, real and painted, swung open at the same time. 2 Tommies entered. Identical down to the acne scars. One from the hallway, one from the painted door. "Don't trust him," they said in unison, pointing at each other. "I'm the real one. Check my shadow." I looked. They both had shadows, but one shadow fell toward the window, and one fell toward the painted door. Wrong. All wrong. Light doesn't work that way. "You have to choose," the left Tommy said. "Give me the key. I'll close the door. End this before it gets worse." "He's lying," the right Tommy said. "Give me the key. I'll destroy it. Make sure this never happens again." They stepped closer. Both desperate, both pleading, both absolutely convincing. "Remember what the bird said?" Left Tommy urged. "The real Tommy has no shadow." "But we both have shadows," right Tommy countered. "Which means the birds lied. They do that. Mix truth with lies. That's how they trap people." I pressed against the window, felt it crack under my weight. The brass key burned in my hand. Outside, the birds formed a single word. Neither, neither, of course. Both Tommies were fake, which meant, "You're both lying," I said. They smiled, the exact same smile at the exact same time. "Very good, Watcher. You passed the first test, but can you pass the second?" They began to change, faces melting, bodies twisting, becoming something else. Something with too many angles, too many teeth, Too many eyes that had seen too much. We were human once, they said, voices harmonizing into something beautiful and terrible. The 17 who read the complete message, who opened the final door. Now we serve. Now we test. Now we prepare the next watcher. Prepare for what? For the choice that matters. For the message that changes everything. They reached out with hands that weren't hands anymore. Give us the key, Jake. Join us. It's not as bad as you think. We still remember being human. Still remember warmth and love and fear. We just remember other things too. Bigger things. Better things. The window cracked more. Cold air rushed in, carrying the sound of wings. Thousands of wings. I said no. They lunged. I threw myself backward through the window, into the October night, 2 stories down to the parking lot. Should have broken my legs. Should have broken everything. But the birds caught me. Thousands of them, forming a living cushion, lowering me gently to the ground while the things that had been Tommy screamed from the broken window above. Maggie stood in the parking lot, the real Maggie, holding her journal and crying. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I thought maybe this time would be different. That maybe you could read the message without becoming like them." What are they? Translators. That's what my grandmother called them. Beings caught between what is and what could be. They read the complete message in 1987, and it transformed them, made them part of the system, part of the test. She helped me to my feet. Every 37 years, the birds come. They write their message, they choose a watcher, and the watcher either reads the complete message and becomes a translator, or refuses and breaks the cycle. Then I refuse. I won't read it. She shook her head, sadly. It's not that simple. You've seen part of it now. It's in your head, growing, spreading. By dawn, you'll know the whole thing whether you want to or not. The only choice is what you do with that knowledge. What happened to the others, the ones who refused? There haven't been any. Every watcher has read the message. Every watcher has become a translator. She looked up at the broken window where the Tommy thing still writhed. 17 in 1987, 12 in 1950, 23 in 1913, always growing, always hungry for more. The birds above us swirled, formed new words. The second key waits where time forgot. In the place where Cedar Rapids died, the watcher has 3 hours. Choose wisely or feed the sky. The old downtown, Maggie whispered. The part they abandoned after the flood of 08. That's where you'll find the second key. I'm not going. I'm getting in my car, and she grabbed my arm. Look at your hand, Jake. I looked. The brass key had fused to my palm. Become part of me. The metal spread like veins under my skin, glowing faintly, pulsing with my heartbeat. It's too late to run, she said. The message is in you now. Fighting it will only make the transformation worse. But if you can find all 3 keys, if you can read the complete message with understanding instead of fear, maybe you can choose a different path. Maybe you can close the door instead of opening it. How do you know all this? She smiled, that sad, knowing smile. Because my grandmother tried to do the same thing in 1950. She found 2 keys before the message consumed her, before she became one of them. She handed me her journal. Take this. Her notes might help. And Jake, whatever you see in the old downtown, whatever speaks to you, remember that not all of it is real. The message likes to play with perception. Test reality, test sanity. Come with me. I can't. Watchers walk alone, that's the rule. She stepped back. 3 hours until dawn. 3 keys to find, 3 choices to make. And somewhere out there, 17 translators waiting to welcome you home. The birds above formed one final word before scattering. Run, so I ran. Not away from Cedar Rapids, but deeper into it, toward the abandoned downtown, toward the second key, toward a truth I didn't want to know but couldn't escape. Behind me, I heard Maggie whisper a prayer in Chinese. For me, for the town, for the world that didn't know it balanced on the edge of change. 3 hours until dawn, 3 keys to find, 3 chances to save my soul, or lose it in the most spectacular way possible. The brass veins in my hand spread past my wrist now. The message grew stronger with each heartbeat. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, something that had once been human waited to test me again. I ran faster. It didn't help. The sky followed me, full of words I didn't want to read but couldn't ignore. The abandoned part of Cedar Rapids looked like a mouthful of broken teeth. Buildings stood empty, windows shattered, walls covered in graffiti that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. The flood of 2008 had killed this part of town, but something else had made sure it stayed dead. The brass veins had spread to my elbow now. Each pulse brought fragments of the message. The space between spaces, where thought becomes flesh. The price of knowing is... I forced the words down, focused on finding the second key. Maggie's journal provided clues. Her grandmother's sketches of buildings that might matter. The old theater, the abandoned department store, the church with no crosses. But it was the birds that guided me. They perched on a single building, hundreds of them, silent and watching. The Cedar Rapids Public Library, or what was left of it. The front doors hung open. Inside, darkness thick enough to touch. I pulled out my phone for light, but the screen showed only static, living static that formed patterns, almost words, almost warnings. I went in anyway. The library had been beautiful once. Marble floors, oak shelves, a painted ceiling showing constellations that didn't match any earthly sky. Now it was a tomb. Books lay scattered like dead things. Pages rustled without any wind, and the smell, God, the smell. Welcome, Watcher. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. I recognized it. Mrs. Patterson from the library, one of the 17. I kept this place running for 40 years, she continued. Stamped due dates, organized story times, helped children find their first favorite book. Now I organize different stories, help different seekers. Would you like to check out a book, Jake? We have quite the collection. I just want the key. Of course you do. They always want the keys, never the knowledge, never the understanding. A shape moved in the darkness. Too tall, too angular. But keys without context are just metal. Let me show you something. The shadows parted. Mrs. Patterson stood there, or something, wearing her face. She held a book, leather-bound, ancient, alive. This is the real message, she said. Not what the birds write, that's just translation, simplification. This is the source. The story that rewrites reality when fully understood. I don't want to understand? No? Then why are you here? Why not let the message consume you like the others? She opened the book. The pages were blank, but I could feel words pressing against the paper, trying to emerge. You're different, Jake. We've been waiting for someone like you, someone who questions, someone who refuses, someone who might actually survive reading the whole truth. Where's the key? She laughed. It sounded like pages tearing. Still so linear, still thinking in terms of objects and goals. The second key isn't a thing, Jake. It's a choice. Stay and read the book. Understand what the message really means. Or continue blind and hope the third key saves you. The brass veins reached my shoulder. My arm felt like it belonged to someone else. Something else. What happens if I read it? You become like us, but with understanding, with purpose. Not just a translator, but an author. Someone who can write new messages, change the story, fix what's broken. She stepped closer. I could see through her skin to the words crawling underneath. This world is dying, Jake. slow and painful and meaningless. The message offers transformation, evolution, a chance to become something more than meat and fear and forgotten dreams. And if I don't, then you find the third key. Complete the ritual, close the door, and condemn this world to continue as it is, broken, cruel, ordinary. She held out the book. Choose, Watcher. Knowledge or ignorance, transformation or stagnation. The second key is your decision. I reached for the book, then stopped. Something Maggie had said about perception, about tests. You're lying, I said. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Am I? The real choice isn't between reading or not reading. It's about understanding what choice means. I stepped back. The second key is rejecting false dichotomies, refusing the either-or, finding the third option. Her smile widened, kept widening, face splitting like an overripe fruit. Oh, you clever thing. You beautiful, clever thing. Yes, yes. The second key is wisdom, the knowledge that every choice creates new choices, that every door leads to other doors. She collapsed, became paper and ink and memory. Where she had stood, a silver key materialized. This one, cold as winter. I picked it up with my good hand, felt it merge with my bones. The brass and silver mixed, created something new, something that hurt less. 2 keys down, 1 to go. But the message was getting stronger. I could see it now, written on the walls, floating in the air, pressed against the inside of my eyelids. The door opens when the watcher reads, but which door and which watcher? Reality is a story we tell ourselves. Change the story, change the world. I stumbled out of the library, found the birds waiting. They formed an arrow pointing east, toward the river, toward the cemetery Maggie had mentioned. My phone buzzed. A text from a number that was just symbols. The third key waits where the 17 sleep, but hurry, dawn comes. And with it, transformation, ready or not. I checked the time. 5:17 a.m., less than an hour until sunrise. The cemetery gates stood open. Fog rolled between the headstones like something alive. And there, in the center, a fresh grave. No headstone, just disturbed earth and the sense of something waiting underneath. The birds circled overhead, writing their final message. Dig, watcher, find what was buried, face what you've become, choose your ending. I fell to my knees, clawed at the earth with hands that weren't entirely human anymore. The brass and silver had spread to my chest. I could feel my heart changing, becoming something that pumped more than blood. 6 feet down, I found it. Not a coffin, a mirror, and in the reflection, I saw myself, but also not myself. I saw what I would become if I let the message complete itself. A creature of living words. Beautiful, terrible, free from every human limitation and human joy. The third key, I whispered. My reflection smiled. The third key is acceptance. Accept what you are becoming, or accept what you are. Either way, you must accept. That's the only way to survive dawn. I pressed my hand against the mirror. It shattered, became 1,000 keys of golden light. They swirled around me, through me, became part of me. 3 keys, 3 choices, 3 chances to decide the future. The message completed itself in my mind. Every word, every truth, every terrible possibility I understood now. The birds weren't invaders. They were antibodies. The message wasn't a curse, it was medicine. And the transformation was optional. I could become a translator. Join the 17 in their eternal duty. I could become an author, rewrite reality according to my vision. Or I could remain human, flawed, limited, mortal, real. The sun broke the horizon. Light spilled across the cemetery like honey. The birds descended, surrounded me, waiting for my choice. I closed my eyes, felt the 3 keys pulsing in my transformed flesh. felt the weight of 17 souls watching, felt the entire world balanced on the edge of change. And I chose. I chose to break the pattern. Instead of reading the message aloud, instead of rejecting it, I wrote my own ending. The keys gave me that power, that one perfect moment of authorship. I choose both and neither, I said. I choose to be human with understanding, to carry the message without becoming it, to watch without transforming, to remember what could be while living in what is. The birds screamed. The 17 translators materialized around me, faces shifting between human and other. They reached out, not to attack, but to touch, to understand. Impossible, they whispered. The message demands transformation or ignorance. You can't walk between. Watch me. The keys dissolved. Not gone, but dispersed, becoming part of the world instead of part of me. The brass and silver faded from my skin, leaving only faint scars. Memory marks, reminder of what I'd almost become. The translators stepped back, lost, confused. For 37 years they'd known their purpose: test the watcher, transform or destroy. But I'd chosen a third way, a human way. What do we do now? Mrs. Patterson asked. Her face flickered between librarian and monster. Whatever you want, I said. The pattern is broken. The message is complete but not spoken. You're free. One by one, they faded, not dying, not leaving, just becoming something new, something between human and translator, something that could choose its own path. The birds dispersed. Just birds again. No more messages, no more tests. I walked back to town as the sun painted everything gold, found Maggie's diner open, coffee brewing, normal life resuming. She stood behind the counter, smiled when she saw me. You did it, she said. You found the fourth option. You knew? I hoped. My grandmother's notes, they hinted at it, that someone might eventually refuse the binary choice, might find a way to carry knowledge without losing humanity. She poured me coffee, black, no sugar. So, what now? I thought about it, about the message still echoing in my mind, about the doors I could open but chose not to, about the stories I could tell but wouldn't. Now I finish my drive to California, sign those divorce papers, start over, live a human life with inhuman memories. I sipped the coffee. It tasted like salvation. But first, breakfast and maybe some pie. Apple or cherry? Surprise me. She laughed, real and warm and human. I think you've had enough surprises for one lifetime. Maybe, but that's what makes life interesting. Outside, the birds gathered on the power lines. Just birds, doing bird things, no messages, no tests, no transformation waiting in the wings. But sometimes, late at night, I still see words in their movements, still feel the keys pulsing in phantom limbs, still hear the 17 whispering about doors and choices and the price of knowing too much. I'm okay with that. It's the price of being the watcher who watched but didn't change. The human who stayed human despite seeing what lies beyond. And if you've made it this far, if you've heard my whole story, then maybe you understand. Maybe you've seen the birds writing messages of your own. Maybe you felt the pull of transformation. My advice, count the birds on your power lines. Remember the number, but don't look too long, don't read too deep. Some messages are meant to be glimpsed, not understood. Stay human, friends. It's harder than becoming something else. But it's worth it. Even when the sky is full of words you're not supposed to read, especially then. Now, I need to ask you something, and be honest. Have you been seeing birds lately, more than usual? Have they been moving strangely, forming patterns? Drop a comment below. Tell me what you've seen. Because here's the thing I didn't mention. The real reason I'm sharing this story. The 37-year cycle? It's not exact. Sometimes it comes early. Sometimes the birds get impatient. And last week, in a small town in Oregon. Someone sent me a video, birds spelling words, new words, different words. The watcher shared the story. Now the story spreads, new watchers rise, new choices. Wait, so tell me, honestly, how many birds did you count? And did they seem to be watching you back? Because if they did, if they formed even the hint of a pattern, then congratulations. You might be the next watcher. And trust me, you'll want to subscribe for what comes next. The message I learned, it's only chapter 1. There are 12 chapters total, 12 transformations, 12 choices. I can only protect you if you're prepared. The birds are coming for all of us, eventually. The only question is, will you be ready when they spell your name? Sweet dreams, friends. And remember, if you hear wings at midnight, don't look up. Some messages are patient, but patience, like everything else, has its limits. Story number 2. The first time I found my glasses inside a sealed jar of peanut butter, I laughed. I mean, what else could you do? Standing there in my kitchen at 2 a.m., Skippy jar in one hand, butter knife in the other, and my reading glasses somehow perfectly preserved in the middle of 40 ounces of creamy spread, like some kind of bizarre modern art piece. I'd been looking for them for 3 hours. Checked every usual spot, nightstand, bathroom counter, that weird gap between the couch cushions where everything eventually migrates. Nothing. Then hunger struck, and there they were, suspended in peanut butter like prehistoric insects trapped in amber. The thing is, I live alone. Have since my divorce 2 years ago, and that jar, factory sealed, I had to peel off the foil myself. But before you click away thinking this is just another weird things happen story, let me tell you something. Whatever's been moving my glasses, it's getting bolder. And last night, I finally saw it. The story begins now. My name's David Chen, and I'm what you'd call boringly predictable. Software engineer, 34, creature of habit. Every morning, coffee at 6:15, emails by 6:45, first meeting at 8 o'clock. I put things in the same places. Keys on the hook, wallet in the bowl, glasses on the nightstand. Always. That's why the peanut butter incident bothered me so much. Not just the impossibility of it, but the disruption to my routine. After fishing them out, and yes, I cleaned them thoroughly, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd been sleepwalking? Stress from the Henderson project at work? But sleepwalkers don't reseal peanut butter jars. They don't carefully place the foil back and screw the lid on tight. I went to bed that night with my glasses secured in their case zipped into my laptop bag. Paranoid? Maybe. But I needed to sleep, not spend another 3 hours hunting for them. The next morning, they were in the freezer. Not the case. Just the glasses. Sitting on top of a bag of frozen peas like they belonged there. Frost crystallizing on the lenses. I stood there, freezer door open, cold air rushing out, trying to process what I was seeing. The laptop bag was still zipped. The case was still inside. Empty. Okay, I said out loud, my voice echoing in the empty kitchen. Okay, this is something. But what? A prank? I'd changed the locks after Sarah moved out. No one had a key. The windows were locked. I'd checked them all before bed. Another new habit from living alone. I called in sick to work. Spent the day installing a security system. 2 cameras in the living room, 1 in the kitchen, 1 in the bedroom. If someone was breaking in to play elaborate pranks, I'd catch them. That night, I put the glasses in the case in the bag, and the bag in my closet. Then I locked the closet door and put the key under my pillow. Overkill? Absolutely. But I was done playing games. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to use the bathroom and nearly had a heart attack. My glasses were balanced on the toilet seat, perfectly centered. Lenses gleaming in the harsh bathroom light. The closet was still locked. The key still under my pillow. The case still in the bag. Empty. I checked the cameras with shaking hands. Kitchen. Nothing. Living room. Nothing. Bedroom. At 2:43 a.m., the footage showed me sleeping. Nothing else. Then, at 2:44, static, just for a second. When the image cleared, nothing had changed. Except I knew that's when it happened. The next 3 weeks became a twisted game of hide and seek. Every morning, somewhere new. Inside a light bulb that was still screwed in and working between 2 slices of bread in a sealed loaf. Underneath my car's hood, balanced on the engine. Inside my work computer's CD drive, while I was using it, frozen in an ice cube. In a tray I'd filled the night before. Each time, the cameras showed the same thing. A second of static, nothing more. I stopped telling people after my boss suggested I take some time to focus on my well-being. Even my therapist, yes, I started seeing one, kept steering our sessions toward stress management techniques. But here's what scared me most. I was getting used to it. The morning I found them inside a can of unopened Coke, I just sighed, grabbed a different can, and went to work. When they appeared in my shoe while I was wearing it, don't ask me how I didn't notice, I simply pulled them out and kept walking. It was becoming normal. Until the morning, I couldn't find them at all. I searched everywhere. Every impossible place they'd been before, every mundane spot they might have migrated to. Nothing. For the first time in weeks, they were simply gone. I had a backup pair, ugly wire frames from 3 prescriptions ago, but that wasn't the point. The game had rules. Twisted, incomprehensible rules, but rules nonetheless. This felt like cheating. I went through my day squinting at screens, fighting a headache that started behind my eyes and spread like spilled paint. By evening, I was genuinely panicked. Not about the glasses themselves, but about what their absence meant. That night, I did something stupid. I sat in my living room with all the lights on and talked to my empty apartment. "Look," I said, feeling ridiculous. "I don't know what you are or what you want, but we had a pattern, right? You hide them somewhere impossible, I find them, we move on. That's the deal." Silence. "I need them back, please." More silence. The kind that makes you aware of every small sound, the refrigerator humming, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps, your own breathing. I went to bed defeated, woke up to my alarm, and felt something on my face, my glasses. I was wearing them, but here's the thing. I'd gone to bed in my contacts, I could feel them, dry and uncomfortable from sleeping in them, yet somehow I was also wearing my glasses. Both at the same time. I stumbled to the bathroom mirror and nearly screamed. The glasses were wrong. Same frames, same prescription, but they looked older, scratched. One temple was slightly bent, the way it had been after I dropped them last year. Except I'd gotten that fixed. These were my glasses, but they weren't. They were like an echo of my glasses. A copy that had been places, seen things, and in the lens's reflection, just for a moment, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A room that wasn't my bathroom. Darker, older, with someone standing just outside the frame, watching. I yanked them off, hands shaking. The moment they left my face, they were normal again. My regular glasses. The scratches gone, the temple straight. But I knew what I'd seen. That's when I started keeping a journal. Not about finding the glasses, that had become routine, but about what I saw when I wore them. Little things at first. Shadows moving opposite to the light. Reflections that lagged a half-second behind. Objects in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned, then bigger things. My apartment, but wrong. Furniture I didn't own. Pictures on the walls of people I didn't know, streets that should lead one place leading somewhere else entirely. And always, that figure just out of sight, I started taking the glasses off the moment I found them. Quick cleaning, then straight into the case. But curiosity is a terrible thing. One morning, after finding them inside a sealed bottle of vitamins, I decided to wear them. Just for a minute, just to see. Big mistake. The world through those lenses was slipping. That's the only way I can describe it. Like, reality was a wet painting and someone had dragged their hand across it. My kitchen existed in two states at once, mine and somewhere else's. In that other kitchen, the figure was clearer. Still peripheral, still just out of direct sight, but human-shaped, standing by my refrigerator. No, their refrigerator. The one that existed in the same space as mine, but wasn't mine. I watched, couldn't help but watch, as the figure opened the fridge, reached inside, pulled out a jar with something floating in it. Something that looked a lot like... I tore the glasses off before I could see more. Stood there panting, gripping the counter. When I finally worked up the courage to check my own fridge, nothing unusual, just leftovers and expired yogurt, but I could still feel it. That other kitchen, that other presence, existing right here, right now, just sideways from reality. That night, I made a decision. I was done being passive. Done just accepting whatever was happening. I was going to wear the glasses and keep them on. I was going to see what was really happening. I was going to look directly at whatever was moving them. I prepared like I was going to war. Laptop recording, phone recording, even an old GoPro strapped to my head. If I disappeared or went crazy, at least there'd be evidence. I put on the glasses at exactly midnight. The world immediately shifted. My apartment was still my apartment, but more. Layers of reality stacked on top of each other like transparent photographs. I could see my actual living room, but also 3, maybe 4 others occupying the same space. Different furniture, different colors, different times of day all at once. And in every version, the figure, not figures, figure, singular. The same presence in each layer, moving between them like walking through rooms, getting closer. I forced myself to stay still, to not run, to finally look directly at it. The figure noticed me noticing, stopped moving, and for the first time, it turned toward me. Have you ever seen someone you know in a dream, and they're wrong? Right face, right clothes, but fundamentally wrong in a way your brain screams about but can't articulate? That's what I saw. It looked like me. Not exactly me. Me if I'd made different choices. Me if Sarah hadn't left. Me if I'd taken that job in Portland. Me if I'd never needed glasses at all. All of those me's superimposed, trying to exist in one space. It spoke. They spoke. All the voices layered like the rooms. You're not supposed to see this. See what? My voice came out steadier than I felt. The spaces between. The places where choices live. Where the unused possibilities go. The other me stepped closer, moving through furniture that existed and didn't exist. Every decision creates a branch. Every branch needs space. It gestured to the layered realities. This is where the unchosen paths wait. Why my glasses? It almost smiled, almost. They help you see. I needed you to understand. To notice, to know that all of this, another gesture, all of this is still here, still real, still possible. But why? Because you stopped looking. The words hit like physical weight. After Sarah. After the divorce. You stopped seeing possibilities, stopped believing in different outcomes. You locked yourself into one path, one routine, one way of being. The layered rooms pulsed, showing glimpses of lives unlived. Me laughing at a party I never attended. Me painting in an apartment I never rented. Me holding a child that was never born. So we had to make you look, had to break your patterns, had to show you that the impossible happens every day. You just choose not to see it. I wanted to argue, to deny it. But every morning, coffee at 6:15, emails by 6:45, first meeting at 8 o'clock. Every evening, home by 6, dinner by 7, Bed by 11. Every day, the same. Safe, predictable, empty. What do you want from me? The other me, all the other MAs, tilted their heads in unison. We want you to choose. Really choose. Not just drift. Not just exist. Choose. Choose what? Anything, everything, just choose. The layers started rotating, spinning around me like a carousel of possibilities. I saw myself taking dancing lessons, traveling to Japan, calling Sarah, not calling Sarah, adopting a dog, writing a novel, learning to cook, staying exactly the same. How? I asked, dizzy from the visions. Take them off, all the voices said at once. Take off the glasses, and tomorrow, do something impossible. I woke up on my couch at 6:14 a.m., 1 minute before my alarm. The glasses were on the coffee table, innocuous and normal. The recordings showed nothing. Just me sitting still for 3 hours, occasionally mumbling. Nothing about layered realities or other versions of myself. Nothing impossible at all. But I remembered every word, every vision, every possibility. I sat there, watching the clock tick to 6:15. Coffee time. The beginning of another identical day. I didn't move. 6:16, 6:17, 6:18. At 6:19, I stood up and made tea instead. It was ridiculous, insignificant, but it was a choice, a different choice. The glasses disappeared that day, not hidden, gone. I searched everywhere, but I knew I wouldn't find them. The game was over, the message delivered. For weeks, I waited for them to return. They didn't. And slowly, I understood why. I didn't need them anymore. I started small, different breakfast, new route to work, saying yes to lunch invitations I'd been declining for months, each choice creating tiny fractures in my routine, then bigger changes. Signed up for that pottery class I'd bookmarked 2 years ago, called my brother in Seattle, adopted a cat, a grumpy orange tabby who knocked things off shelves and demanded attention at inconvenient times. Life got messier, less predictable, more real. 6 months later, I was at a coffee shop I'd never tried before, reading a book instead of emails when someone said, "David? David Chen?" I looked up. It was Sarah. Looking older, tired, but there. "Hi," I said. A choice presenting itself. "Hi," she said back. Would you mind if I sat?" Another choice. "I'd like that." We talked. Not about us, not at first, just talked. Like two people who used to know each other, discovering who they'd become. When she left an hour later, she paused. "This is going to sound weird, but you seem different. More present?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm trying something new, making different choices." She smiled. "It suits you." After she left, I noticed something on the table. A pair of reading glasses. Not mine, I was wearing contacts, just abandoned glasses. Waiting, I picked them up, studied them. Normal glasses. Nothing special, nothing impossible. I looked through them anyway. The coffee shop was just a coffee shop. No layers, no other realities. But in the window's reflection, I caught a glimpse of something. Not another me this time, just me. Sitting in a coffee shop I'd chosen to visit, after a conversation I'd chosen to have, living a life I was actively choosing. And behind me, barely visible, a familiar figure. Watching, nodding, fading. I left the glasses on the table. Someone else would need them. Someone else stuck in their patterns, their routines, their single narrow path through possibility. That was 3 months ago. Last week, something strange happened at work. I was debugging code, a normal Tuesday afternoon task, when my screen flickered. Just once, like the old static from the security cameras, but different. When it cleared, there was a line of code I hadn't written. / the impossible is a door, not a wall. I stared at it, checked the version history. Nothing. The line didn't exist in any previous save. But there it was, nested between my functions like it belonged there. I deleted it, saved, refreshed. It was back. / the impossible is a door, not a wall. / Some doors open both ways. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Around me, my coworkers typed away, oblivious. Normal Tuesday, normal office. Normal everything except for the impossible message breeding in my code. "You okay, Chen?" I jumped. Marcus, from the next cube, was looking at me with concern. "Yeah, just weird bug." He laughed. "Tell me about it. I've been chasing the same error for 3 hours." After he turned away, I looked back at my screen. The messages were gone. My code was clean, functional, normal. But I knew what I'd seen. That night I found myself thinking about doors, how we pass through them every day without consideration. Enter, exit, enter, exit. But what if Marcus was wrong? What if there weren't just 2 directions? What if some doors opened sideways? The thought followed me home, followed me to bed, followed me into dreams where I walked through my apartment, but every doorway led somewhere else. Kitchen to a forest. Bathroom to an ocean. Bedroom to... I woke up in my living room. Standing up, facing my front door, my hand was on the doorknob, turning it. I could feel the cold metal, the mechanism clicking, the door beginning to open. I jerked my hand back like it was burning. Stumbled backward, heart hammering. The door was cracked open just an inch. Through the gap, I should have seen my apartment hallway. Ugly carpet, flickering fluorescent light, Mrs. Patterson's welcome mat. Instead, I saw stars. Not the night sky, not space, something else. Stars that moved like living things, swirling in patterns that hurt to perceive. And between them, nothing. Not darkness, not void, just nothing. I slammed the door shut, locked it, put a chair against it for good measure. Then I noticed my glasses on the coffee table, the ones that had been gone for 3 months. They looked different, older, like they'd traveled through years in the time they'd been away. The frames were worn smooth, the metal oxidized in places. But they were mine, unmistakably mine. A sticky note was wrapped around one arm. Same handwriting as the peanut butter message. Some doors only open for those who've learned to see. I didn't put them on, not right away. Instead, I made coffee. Yes, coffee, not tea, my choice, and sat thinking. About doors, about possibilities, about the fact that I was handling this so much better than I would have a year ago. The old me would have called someone, would have panicked, would have tried to rationalize it away. The current me just sipped coffee and considered the implications. When the sun came up, painting my living room in normal, safe daylight, I finally picked up the glasses, held them up to the light. Through the lenses, the sunrise looked different. More colors than should exist. Beautiful and terrible and impossible. I put them on. The world didn't layer this time, didn't split into multiple realities. Instead, it deepened. Like switching from standard definition to something beyond high definition. Everything was exactly where it should be, but I could see the more of it all. My coffee mug wasn't just ceramic, it was earth and fire and time. The hands that shaped it left traces in the clay, not fingerprints, but intentions, hopes. The potter's wish that someone would enjoy their morning coffee a little more because of this simple vessel. I could see the history in my walls. Not just paint and drywall, but decades of lives lived. Laughter absorbed into the structure. Arguments that left tiny fractures. Love that reinforced the foundations. And I could see the doors, not just the physical ones. The other kind. The possibility doors. They shimmered at the edges of decision points. Transparent, nearly invisible unless you knew how to look. There was one by my phone, call Sarah, don't call Sarah. One by my laptop, quit job, stay at job, ask for promotion. Dozens of them scattered throughout my apartment like opportunities waiting to be noticed. But the biggest one, The biggest one was right where my front door had been. This morning, I found something impossible. Not my glasses, those I'm wearing now, showing me more than I ever knew existed. No, I found something else. A note. Inside a sealed jar of peanut butter. Different jar, different brand, but the callback was obvious. The note said, "You're ready for the next impossible thing. I know what it means now, know what's coming. And for the first time in years, I'm not just excited, I'm ready." The door, my actual front door, the one that leads to the hallway with ugly carpet, looks normal now. But I can see the shimmer around its edges. The place where it could become something else. Where it wants to become something else. My cat, Theodore, watches me from his perch on the kitchen counter. He sees it too. Cats always know about the impossible spaces. It's why they stare at empty corners and chase things that aren't there. Except the things are there. We just can't see them. Usually. I stand up, glasses still on, and walk to the door. Each step feels momentous. Like I'm choosing not just to walk, but to arrive somewhere that doesn't exist yet. My hand touches the doorknob. Cold metal. Warm possibilities. The thing about doors, I say out loud, maybe to Theodore, maybe to myself, maybe to whatever's been moving my glasses, is that they're just suggestions. Stay here, go there. Inside, outside, known, unknown. I turn the handle. But what if... Click. The mechanism releases. What if the real choice isn't about going through? I pull the door open. My hallway is there, ugly carpet and all. But overlaid on it, like a double exposure, is somewhere else. A place that shouldn't exist but does. A space between spaces where lost things wait and found things remember being lost. What if the real choice is about finally understanding that every door is impossible? I see it now. See them. All the other me's who made this choice on different days in different ways. We're all standing at our doors, looking into the impossible, finally ready to step through. Not to escape our lives, but to expand them. Theodore meows, a sound that echoes in dimensions cats can access but humans can only glimpse. He's approving, or warning, maybe both. I take off my glasses, hold them carefully, put them in my pocket. I don't need them anymore. The impossible isn't something you see, it's something you choose. And every choice is a door. Because here's what I learned. The impossible isn't about ghosts or entities or parallel dimensions. It's about the choices we don't make, the lives we don't live, the patterns we never break. We're all haunted by our unchosen possibilities. Most of us just never see them. But they're there, waiting, in the spaces between one choice and another. In the moment before coffee becomes tea. In the second before no becomes yes. The impossible happens every day. We just have to choose to see it. And sometimes we need a little help. A small impossibility to remind us that the world is bigger than our routines, that we're more than our patterns. Sometimes we need to find our glasses in impossible places, just to remember how to look. So I have to ask, have you ever found something where it absolutely shouldn't be? Something that made you question, just for a moment, what's really possible? Let me know in the comments below. Because I've learned something. We're all living closer to the impossible than we think. Subscribe if you want to hear more true stories about the impossible things that happen when we're brave enough to look. And remember, sometimes the scariest thing isn't what goes bump in the night. Sometimes it's realizing you've been sleepwalking through your days. And something out there wants to wake you up. Story number 3. The music stopped at exactly 9:47 p.m. Not the way music is supposed to stop. Not with a final note or a conductor's flourish. It just ceased, like someone had pulled the plug on reality itself. And when the lights came back on after that impossible darkness, every single musician was gone. 73 people vanished, their instruments still warm, still positioned as if invisible hands were holding them. The violin bows resting on strings that would never sing again. The thing is, I was supposed to be up there with them. If I hadn't been late, if I hadn't stopped for that coffee, would I have disappeared too? Or would I have been the only one left, playing to an empty stage? Before you close this video, let me tell you what really happened that night at the Riverside Symphony Hall in Portland. Because the news got it wrong. Everyone got it wrong. They said it was a publicity stunt, a magic trick gone too far. But I was there. I saw what happened in those final moments. And I need someone, anyone, to believe me. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I played second violin for the Portland Metropolitan Orchestra. Played. Past tense. Because after what happened on October 15th, I don't think I'll ever pick up a violin again. That Tuesday started like any other performance day. I woke up in my cramped studio apartment on Burnside Street, the autumn rain tapping against my window like nervous fingers. The gray Portland sky pressed down on the city, making everything feel smaller, closer. I remember thinking it was perfect weather for Mahler's Symphony No. 2, the Resurrection Symphony. How's that for irony? I should have been at the hall by 6 p.m. for warm-ups. Instead, I was running late, again. My car wouldn't start. That old Honda had been giving me trouble for weeks. So I had to take the Max train. Then I remembered I'd left my rosin in my other case. By the time I got to Powell City of Books to catch my breath and grab a coffee from their cafe, it was already 7:15. The barista, a kid with paint-stained fingers and tired eyes, made my usual cortado without me having to ask. "Big performance tonight?" he asked, noticing my formal black dress under my raincoat. "Mahler," I said, checking my phone for the 100th time. 17 missed calls from David, our first chair. I'm already dead. The kid laughed. "Break a leg, I guess." I grabbed my coffee and rushed back into the rain. The Riverside Symphony Hall was only 6 blocks away, but in heels and a dress, carrying a violin case, every block felt like a mile. The streets were oddly empty for a Tuesday night. Usually, the Pearl District would be buzzing with people heading to restaurants, galleries, bars. But that night, it felt like the city was holding its breath. I remembered the exact moment I realized something was wrong. I was 2 blocks from the hall when every streetlight on the block flickered. Not all at once, but in sequence, like dominoes falling. The traffic lights too, even the neon signs in the shop windows. Flicker, flicker, dark, then back on, as if nothing had happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael, our principal cellist. "Where are you? David's about to have a stroke. We're starting in 20. I typed back, "Almost there. Did the lights just..." But the message wouldn't send. No signal. I looked at my phone. Full bars, but nothing would go through. The Riverside Symphony Hall loomed ahead, its Art Deco facade glowing under the spotlights. Built in 1928, it was one of Portland's architectural treasures. 3,000 seats, perfect acoustics, and, according to the old-timers, a few ghost stories of its own. Musicians who heard phantom applause in empty halls. Instruments that played themselves in locked rooms. The usual theater superstitions. I burst through the stage door at 7:54, 6 minutes to curtain. "Jen?" Margaret, our stage manager, grabbed my arm. "Thank God, David's been..." She paused, frowning. "You feeling all right? You look pale." "I'm fine. Just... the lights outside, did you see..." "What lights?" "Never mind, no time, they're already seated. Go, go, go." I rushed to the musician's entrance, my heels clicking on the worn linoleum. The familiar sounds of pre-performance should have been everywhere. Instruments warming up, musicians chatting, the distant murmur of the audience. But it was quiet. Too quiet. I pushed open the door to the wings and the orchestra was already on stage. All 73 of them seated, instruments ready. But they weren't warming up, they weren't moving. They sat perfectly still, like a photograph. staring straight ahead at their music stands. "What the hell?" I whispered. Then I heard it, or rather, didn't hear it, the audience. 3,000 people sitting beyond the curtain, and not a single cough, whisper, or rustling program. The silence was so complete it had weight pressing against my eardrums. David turned his head. Just his head, his body remaining perfectly still, and looked directly at me. His eyes were wrong. The warm brown I'd known for 5 years was gone, replaced by something flat and empty, like looking into deep water at night. He smiled. Not his usual pre-performance nervous smile. This was something else. Something that didn't reach those terrible eyes. "Sarah," he said, and his voice came out in perfect stereo as if spoken by every member of the orchestra simultaneously. "You're late." I stepped backward, my violin case hitting the doorframe. Every head in the orchestra turned to look at me. 73 faces with those same empty eyes, those same wrong smiles. "We started without you," they said in that horrible unified voice. "But don't worry, you can watch." The lights dimmed. The curtain began to rise. And I ran. I didn't get far, how could I? This was my orchestra, my family. These people had played at my mother's funeral, celebrated with me when I got tenure. David had taught me to play poker on long tour bus rides. Margaret had set me up on 3 disastrous blind dates. Michael and I had spent countless hours arguing about whether Brahms was better than Beethoven over beers at Deschutes Brewery. So I stopped at the edge of the wings, hidden in shadow, my heart hammering against my ribs. The audience came into view as the curtain rose, and my blood turned to ice water. They sat in perfect rows, 3,000 people, faces tilted up toward the stage. But like the orchestra, they were wrong. Too still. No fidgeting, no checking phones, no whispered conversations. Just 3,000 pairs of eyes reflecting the stage lights like mirrors. Our conductor, James Morrison, 60 years old, silver-haired, usually vibrating with nervous energy, walked onto the stage. But his movements were fluid in a way that made my skin crawl. Too smooth. Like watching a marionette operated by an expert puppeteer. He raised his baton. The orchestra raised their instruments in perfect synchronization. No slight variations, no personal timing. They moved as one entity. And then they began to play. I need you to understand something. I've heard Mahler's Second Symphony performed by the best orchestras in the world. I've played it myself maybe 50 times. But what came from that stage? It wasn't music, not really. It was something wearing music's skin. The notes were perfect, technically flawless, but there was something underneath them, some frequency that human ears weren't meant to process. It made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. The melody was right, but it was like looking at a familiar face in a dream and knowing, somehow, that it wasn't really them. I pressed myself against the wall, my hands shaking. My phone still had no signal. The emergency exits. I could see them from where I stood, but the thought of walking past all those empty-eyed audience members made my legs weak. Then I noticed something else. The instruments themselves were changing. It was subtle at first. The wood of the violins seemed to darken, taking on an oily sheen. The brass instruments began to tarnish, but instead of going dull, they started to glow with a sick, greenish light. The piano. God, the piano. Its black surface started to ripple like water, but the musicians kept playing. Their fingers flew over strings and keys with inhuman precision, even as their instruments transformed into something alien. I watched David, my mentor, my friend, as his violin began to merge with his chin, the wood flowing into his skin like melting wax. He didn't react. None of them did. They just kept playing that horrible, perfect music. The first movement reached its crescendo, and that's when the air started to change. It thickened, became viscous. The stage lights flickered. Not on and off, but between colors that shouldn't exist. Have you ever tried to imagine a color you've never seen? That's what filled the concert hall. Colors that made my brain hurt trying to process them. A memory surfaced, something James had said during rehearsal last week. He'd been excited about this performance more than usual. The Resurrection Symphony, he'd said, is about transformation, about becoming something greater than human. We'd all rolled our eyes at his pretentious artist talk, but now, watching him conduct with movements that defied human anatomy, his arms bending in too many places, I wondered what he'd really meant. The second movement began. The Landler, usually so playful and light, but in their hands it became a dance of something else. The rhythm was wrong. Not in a way you could point to on sheet music, but wrong in the way that made your heartbeat skip, trying to sync with it. That's when I saw the first musician begin to fade. It started with Amy, our principal flutist. As she played, her edges began to blur, like someone had taken an eraser to a pencil drawing. Her face remained serene, focused on the music, even as her body became translucent. I could see the chair through her, then the stage, then... She was gone, but the flute remained, floating in mid-air, still playing. One by one they began to disappear. Not dramatically, no flash of light or puff of smoke. They simply faded out of existence, leaving their instruments hanging in space, continuing the symphony without them. The music never faltered. If anything, it grew stronger, more complex, as if the removal of human limitations had freed it to become what it truly wanted to be. The audience swayed in their seats, a subtle movement, like seaweed in an underwater current. Their eyes never left the stage, never blinked. I wondered if they were even breathing. By the third movement, half the orchestra was gone. Instruments floated in precise formation, bows drawing across strings with no hands to guide them, keys depressing on woodwinds that breathed without lungs. James still conducted, but he was fading too, becoming a shimmer of motion, a suggestion of a man. I should have run then. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, to find help, to do something. But I couldn't move. The music held me in place like a physical force. It was inside my head now, rewriting the rhythm of my thoughts, trying to sync me with whatever was happening on that stage. Then I heard my name, not spoken, played. The violins shaped the notes into Sarah, stretching the syllables across measures. The cellos answered, "Come play with us." The woodwinds whispered, "You're late, but not too late." My violin case grew warm in my hand. Inside, I could feel my instrument responding, vibrating with sympathy to its siblings on stage. The latches popped open on their own. "No," I whispered, but my hands were already reaching for the violin, my fingers finding their position on the neck with muscle memory that overrode my terror. The fourth movement was beginning, the Urlicht, the primal light, the movement about the soul's journey after death. There were only a dozen musicians left on stage now, fading fast. David was just a suggestion of a person, his outline flickering like a candle in wind. But he turned to look at me one last time, and for just a moment I saw my friend again, the real David, trapped behind those empty eyes. His lips moved. No sound, but I could read the word. Run. Then he was gone. The stage was empty now. 73 instruments hung in the air, playing Mahler's masterpiece to an audience of mannequins. The music had become something beyond sound. It was a presence, a living thing that filled the concert hall like floodwater, rising higher with each measure. My violin was out of its case, in my hands. I wasn't controlling it anymore. My fingers found the notes of the second violin part, picking up exactly where I should have been if I'd made it to the performance on time. The music flowed through me, and for a moment, God help me, it felt wonderful, like coming home after a long journey. Like every performance I'd ever given had been practice for this moment. I understood then. The months of preparation, James's obsessive attention to detail, the way he'd insisted on this specific date, this specific time. October 15th, 9:47 p.m. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known what would happen when the right music was played at the right moment in this old hall, with its perfect acoustics and its century of accumulated sound. Every note ever played in the Riverside Symphony Hall was still here, trapped in the wood and stone like memories. And tonight, with Mahler's Symphony of Resurrection, we were bringing them all back. Every performance, every musician, every audience member who had ever sat in these seats and let the music transport them. They were all here, waiting. I took a step toward the stage, then another. My feet moved without my permission, carrying me toward my empty chair, toward the space where I belonged. The audience turned their heads in unison to watch me, 3,000 pairs of mirror eyes reflecting my progress. But as I walked, I noticed something else. My coffee cup. I was still holding my coffee cup from Powell's. The ordinary cardboard cup with its ordinary coffee ring stain. Real, solid, present, the kid at the counter. Paint-stained fingers, tired eyes. Break a leg, I guess. The coffee was still warm. I stopped walking. The music faltered for just a moment, a hairline crack in its perfection. The floating instruments dipped slightly, as if surprised. The audience rustled, the first movement I'd seen from them since the curtain rose. I lifted the cup to my lips and took a sip. Bitter, over-extracted, real. "No," I said out loud. "No, I don't think I will." The music surged, trying to pull me back. The violin in my hands grew hot, the strings cutting into my fingers, but I held on to that coffee cup like a life preserver. I thought about the barista, about my broken Honda, about the rain on Burnside Street, real things, human things, imperfect things. The instruments on stage began to shake, their perfect formation wavering. The music was still beautiful, but now I could hear what was underneath it. Not just that alien frequency, but something else. Hunger. Vast and ancient and patient. This thing, whatever it was, had been waiting in the spaces between notes, in the silence between movements, waiting for someone to play the right music at the right time to open the door wide enough for it to come through. And we'd almost done it. 73 musicians, playing in perfect harmony, conducted by a man who'd spent his whole life preparing for this moment without knowing it. The Resurrection Symphony, bringing something back that should have stayed dead, but I was late. One violin short of the full orchestra. One imperfect human who'd stopped for coffee and missed her cue. The floating instruments began to fall. Not all at once, first a piccolo, then a timpani, then the entire brass section. They clattered to the stage with sounds that were too loud, too real. The audience began to stir, confusion breaking through whatever spell held them. James, or what was left of James, turned to me. He was barely visible now, just a shimmer in the air. But I could feel his rage, his disappointment. All that preparation, ruined by one late violinist. The music was falling apart. Without the full orchestra, without that perfect synchronization, it couldn't maintain its hold on reality. The impossible colors faded. The thick air thinned. The audience began to blink, to cough, to remember they were human. And in that moment of collapse, I saw them. My orchestra. They hung suspended between here and there, between our world and wherever the music had been taking them. 73 people caught in transition, reaching out to me with desperate, fading hands. I wanted to save them. God, I wanted to pull them back. But I knew if I stepped onto that stage, if I completed the symphony, something else would come through with them. Something that had been waiting for so long it had forgotten what it meant to wait. Something that wore music like a mask, but underneath was nothing but appetite. So, I did the only thing I could do. I dropped my violin. It shattered on the floor with a discord that ripped through the concert hall like a scream. The floating instruments fell. The lights blazed back to normal. The audience gasped as one, suddenly awake, suddenly aware that something was terribly wrong. And the orchestra, they were gone. The aftermath was chaos. 3,000 confused audience members, a stage full of abandoned instruments, and me, standing in the wings with a broken violin and a cold cup of coffee, trying to explain something that couldn't be explained. The police came first, then the FBI, then people in suits who didn't identify themselves but asked questions that made it clear they'd seen something like this before. They took my statement 16 times. They studied the security footage that showed nothing but an empty stage from 9:47 p.m. onward. They interviewed every audience member, but none of them remembered anything between the curtain rising and suddenly finding themselves staring at an empty stage. The official story was mass hysteria. A gas leak, a publicity stunt gone wrong. Take your pick. The media ran with various theories. A flash mob, a protest against arts funding, an elaborate magic trick. David Copperfield tweeted that he wished he'd thought of it first. Within a week, it was old news. Within a month, forgotten. But I remember, and I'm not the only one. Margaret, our stage manager, quit the day after. She said she couldn't stand being in the building anymore. Said she could still hear them sometimes, practicing in empty rooms. The new stage manager doesn't last long. No one does. The Riverside Symphony Hall is closed now. They say it needs renovations, structural repairs. But I've walked past it at night, and I've seen the lights flickering in the windows. I've heard music drifting from the sealed doors. Not Mahler, thank God, but something else. All the symphonies ever played there, mixing together, trying to find the right combination to finish what we started. I found David's violin last week. It was in my apartment, sitting on my kitchen table when I came home from work. His Guarneri del Gesù, worth more than my life, just there. The strings were new, the bow freshly rosined, and tucked under the chin rest, a program from our last performance. October 15th, Mahler's Symphony No. 2, Resurrection. Someone had written on it in David's handwriting. We're still playing, Sarah. The symphony isn't finished. It's never finished. Come back, complete the circle. I burned it. Burned the program, burned the violin, burned everything that connected me to that night. But I can't burn the memories. Can't burn the dreams where I'm sitting in my chair, second violin section, playing music that human hands were never meant to play. Can't burn the moments when I catch myself humming Mahler and feel my fingers automatically finding the positions on a violin I no longer own. The Portland Metropolitan Orchestra reformed 6 months later with new musicians. They perform at the Schnitzer Concert Hall now, on the other side of the city. They've never programmed Mahler. The new conductor says it's out of respect for the missing musicians, but I know the truth. He's scared. We're all scared. Because here's the thing, and this is why I'm telling you this story, why I need someone to know. It's not over. Last month, the Seattle Symphony performed Mahler's second. 13 musicians called in sick that night. The ones who showed up reported strange acoustics, instruments that seemed to play themselves, audience members who sat too still. They completed the performance, but barely. 2 weeks ago, the San Francisco Orchestra attempted it. The concert was canceled midway through the second movement when the stage lights started showing those impossible colors. The official reason was a power failure. 3 days ago, the Los Angeles Philharmonic announced they'd be performing Mahler's Resurrection Symphony on December 21st. Winter solstice, 9:47 p.m. start time. They don't know. How could they? The real story was buried under gas leak theories and mass hysteria explanations. But I know, and now you know. The thing that almost came through that night in Portland, it's still trying. Every performance of Mahler's Second is another attempt, another key in the lock. Most aren't right. Wrong time, wrong place, wrong acoustic conditions. But eventually someone will get it right. Some orchestra will play those notes in perfect harmony at just the right moment. And this time, there won't be a late violinist to break the spell. I've tried to warn them. Called, emailed, sent registered letters. They think I'm insane. A traumatized survivor creating conspiracy theories to deal with my grief. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am insane. But I still hear them sometimes. Late at night, when the city is quiet and the rain taps against my window like nervous fingers, I hear the Portland Metropolitan Orchestra playing somewhere just beyond the edge of perception. They're still performing, still perfect, still waiting for their missing violinist to complete the symphony. And the worst part? The part that keeps me awake, clutching that paint-stained coffee cup I've kept all these months like a talisman. Sometimes I want to join them, because the music was beautiful. God help me, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And isn't that what we all want in the end? To be part of something perfect? To transcend our flawed human limitations and become pure art? My new violin sits in its case in my closet. I haven't played since that night. But lately, my fingers have been itching. The calluses are fading, and that bothers me more than it should. Last night, I caught myself looking up the December 21st performance in LA, checking ticket prices, calculating drive time, 9:47 p.m., winter solstice, Mahler's Symphony No. 2, the Resurrection Symphony, maybe this time. No, I won't. I can't. I've told you the story, I've warned you, that's all I can do. If you hear about another orchestra disappearing, another gas leak or mass hysteria event, you'll know the truth. You'll know what really happened to the 73 musicians of the Portland Metropolitan Orchestra. They're still out there, somewhere between the notes, playing their eternal symphony, and they're waiting for someone to complete the performance, waiting for someone to open the door wide enough for what lies beyond to finally come through. Don't let it be you. When December 21st comes, stay home, stay real. Hold on to something solid, a coffee cup, a broken car key, a memory of rain. Hold on to your imperfections. They're all that's keeping you here. Because perfection has teeth, and it's hungry. If you're still listening, if this story kept you company in the dark, then maybe you understand. Maybe you felt it too. That pull toward something beautiful and terrible. Share this. Not because I asked you to, but because someone else might need to hear it. Someone else might be walking toward their own empty stage, violin in hand, ready to complete a symphony that should never be finished. What do you think really happened that night? Have you ever felt music pull you somewhere you shouldn't go? Tell me in the comments below. But be careful. Sometimes, when we share our stories, we give them power. And if you hear Mahler playing in the distance, if you see lights flickering in sequence, if your instrument starts to warm in its case without reason, run. Just run. Story number 4. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers this morning, crashed against the kitchen tiles, and that's when I noticed the door to my pantry was slightly open. Just a crack. But through that crack, I could see my bedroom. Not the pantry shelves. Not the canned goods and cereal boxes. My bedroom, with its unmade bed and the alarm clock still blinking 3:33 a.m. I'm recording this because, well, I need someone to know what's happening here. And if you're listening to this late at night, maybe check your doors. All of them. Right now. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 weeks ago I inherited my grandmother's house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's one of those classic Midwestern homes, you know the type. White clapboard siding, wraparound porch built in 1923. The kind of house that creaks when you walk, but in a comforting way. Or at least, it used to be comforting. I'd been living in a cramped Chicago apartment for 5 years, so inheriting a whole house felt like winning the lottery. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a finished basement, and 17 doors. Yes, I counted them. 17 doors, including closets, the attic access, even the little door under the stairs where Grandma kept her vacuum. The first week was perfect. I'd taken time off from my remote marketing job to settle in. Unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, tried to make the place feel like mine, while still honoring Grandma's memory. She'd left everything to me, her only grandchild. The house still smelled like her lavender potpourri and the sugar cookies she always kept in the ceramic jar by the stove. It was Tuesday morning when things changed. I'd been having trouble sleeping. New house sounds, you know? Every settling beam, every whisper of wind through the old windows kept me half awake. So when my alarm went off at 7, I stumbled downstairs in desperate need of caffeine. The kitchen was exactly as I'd left it the night before. Dishes drying in the rack, a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in the fridge. My laptop closed on the breakfast nook table. Normal, peaceful, safe. I filled the coffee maker, hit the button, and leaned against the counter to wait. That's when I noticed the pantry door, just slightly ajar, maybe 2 inches. Weird because I distinctly remembered closing it after grabbing chips the night before. I always close doors. It's a thing with me, a little compulsion from childhood. Through the gap, I expected to see the usual soup cans, pasta boxes, the step stool I used to reach the high shelves. Instead, I saw rumpled bed sheets. My bed sheets. The ones with the tiny blue flowers that I'd bought specifically for this fresh start. My brain did that thing where it tries to make sense of the impossible. Maybe there was a mirror in the pantry, but no. I'd organized that space myself. Maybe I was more tired than I thought, but the image was crystal clear. My bedroom, viewed from an angle that should have been looking at flour and sugar containers. I pushed the door open wider and stepped into my bedroom. Not through a hallway, not up the stairs. I opened the pantry door in my kitchen, took 1 step forward, and I was standing next to my unmade bed, 14 feet from where I'd started. The alarm clock on my nightstand read 3:33 a.m., which made no sense because sunlight was streaming through the windows. I spun around. The door I'd just walked through. It was my bedroom door now, the one that should lead to the upstairs hallway, but through it I could see my kitchen, the coffee maker gurgling away, steam rising from the pot. My hands were shaking as I walked back through. Kitchen. Normal kitchen. I was standing exactly where I'd been 30 seconds ago, except now the coffee was ready and my heart was trying to hammer its way out of my chest. I must have checked that pantry door 20 times that day. Opened it fast, opened it slow, opened it with my eyes closed. Every single time, shelves, food, normal pantry things. Whatever I'd seen, whatever had happened, it was gone. But here's the thing about impossible experiences. They leave a mark, like a splinter in your mind that you can't stop poking at. I found myself checking other doors, cautiously, nervously. The hall closet opened to reveal coats and boots. The bathroom door led to the bathroom. Everything was exactly as it should be. Until it wasn't. 3 days passed before it happened again. 3 days of me jumping at every door creak, triple-checking locks, sleeping with my bedroom door not just closed but barricaded with a chair. I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress from the move. Grief over losing Grandma. Maybe even a gas leak causing hallucinations. I'd bought a carbon monoxide detector just to be sure. It was Friday night. I'd invited my best friend Megan over for dinner, partly for company, partly to prove to myself that the house was normal. We made tacos, drank wine, laughed about her terrible dating life. For a few hours, I felt human again. "I still can't believe this place is yours," Megan said, spinning around the living room with her arms spread wide. "Do you know how much my studio costs? And I can literally touch both walls at the same time." I laughed. "Yeah, it's amazing. Grandma always said she wanted me to have it, said it needed someone young to bring life back to it." "Well, here's to Grandma Chen." Megan raised her wine glass. "And to Sarah, who escaped Chicago rent prices forever." We clinked glasses. Everything felt normal, right, safe. Then Megan needed to use the bathroom. "Down the hall, first door on the right," I told her, not looking up from the dishes I was loading into the dishwasher. I heard her footsteps on the hardwood, heard the door open, and then silence. Not normal bathroom sounds, just nothing. "Meg?" I called out after a minute. "You okay?" No answer. I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked toward the hallway. The bathroom door was closed. I knocked softly. "Megan, did you fall in or something?" Still nothing. I turned the handle, pushed the door open, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't the bathroom. It was my kitchen. The kitchen I'd just left. I could see the dishwasher door hanging open, the wine glasses on the counter, even the dish towel I'd dropped on the floor in my hurry. But I was still standing in the hallway. I looked behind me. The living room was right there, exactly where it should be. I looked through the doorway again. Kitchen. My kitchen. From an impossible angle. "Megan?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. That's when I heard her, laughing, from upstairs. I ran up the steps 2 at a time and found her in my bedroom, standing by the window looking confused but amused. "Sarah, how did you get a door from your bathroom directly to your bedroom? That's so cool, though kind of weird for guests." She turned and saw my face. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak, couldn't explain, because how do you tell someone that the doors in your house have stopped following the rules of physics? I think the wine hit me harder than I thought," I managed. Can we go back downstairs?" We spent the rest of the evening in the living room. I didn't let her out of my sight. When she needed the bathroom again, I walked her to the downstairs powder room and waited outside. She thought I was being weird. I didn't care. After she left, promising to text me when she got home, I did something I hadn't done since I was 8 years old. I went through the house and put a piece of tape on every single door, across the gap where door meets frame. If anything opened during the night, I'd know. I barely slept. Every sound made me bolt upright. Every shadow looked like a doorway opening. But when morning came, all the tape was intact. 17 doors, all still sealed. I wish that had made me feel better. The pattern emerged slowly. It wasn't every door, every time. It wasn't predictable, but it was real. The door to the basement would open onto the attic. The linen closet would lead to the garage. The front door, God, the front door was the worst. Sometimes opened onto other rooms in the house instead of outside. I started mapping it. A notebook filled with times, dates, which door led where. Looking for logic in the illogical. The 3:33 a.m. on my alarm clock became a recurring theme. No matter what time I walked through a wrong door, any clock in the destination room showed 3:33. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I leave? Just pack up and get out? I tried. The first time I attempted to leave, really leave, not just run errands, but move out. Every door led back inside. Front door led to the basement. Back door opened onto the second-floor hallway, even the windows. When I tried to climb out one, I ended up crawling through into the attic. The house wouldn't let me go. By the 3rd week, I'd developed rules. Survival strategies, really. Never open a door without knocking first. sometimes, just sometimes, I'd hear something on the other side that warned me. Footsteps that didn't match the room that should be there. Weather that was wrong. Rain in what should be an interior closet. Once, I heard my own voice talking to someone even though I was alone. Always prop doors open when you go through. A doorstop, a book, anything. Because sometimes they'd close on their own, and when they did, they might not open to the same place twice. Keep supplies in every room. Water bottles, granola bars, phone chargers. Because you never knew when a simple trip to the bathroom might strand you 3 rooms away from where you started. And most importantly, never go through a door at 3:33 a.m. or p.m. That's when things got worse. But even with all my precautions, I wasn't prepared for what I found behind the 17th door. It was the small door under the stairs. The one where Grandma kept her vacuum. I'd been avoiding it. Something about its size, its location, made me uneasy. But I needed the vacuum. The house still had to be maintained, even if it was slowly driving me insane. I knocked first, waited. No sound. I turned the handle slowly, expecting to see the familiar vacuum cleaner, maybe some cleaning supplies. Instead, I saw a room that shouldn't exist. It was massive, impossibly huge. The ceiling stretched up into darkness. No, not darkness. Distance. Like looking up at a night sky, except instead of stars, there were doors. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Floating at different heights, different angles, some right side up, some sideways, some upside down. The floor was wrong. It looked like hardwood from where I stood, but as it extended outward, it became tile, then carpet, then grass, then back to hardwood. Like someone had stitched together pieces of different rooms, different houses, different worlds. And in the center of it all, in the center was a room. A perfect cube of space, maybe 20 feet on each side, with walls made entirely of doors. Door after door after door, pressed together like scales on a fish. Different styles, different colors, different ages. Some looked ancient, with iron hinges and wooden planks. Others were modern, with sleek handles and frosted glass. Inside that cube of doors, I could see furniture. My grandmother's furniture. But also furniture I didn't recognize. A couch that looked like mine, but in a color I'd never owned. A dining table set for 12, even though Grandma's only sat 6. Photos on the walls. Some familiar, some showing people I'd never seen before. I took a step forward, and the vacuum closet door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed in that impossible space. Echoed and changed, becoming not one slam but dozens, hundreds. All around me, doors were closing, opening, closing again. A symphony of hinges and latches and wood against wood. I tried to go back, spun around, grabbed the handle of the door I'd just come through. It opened onto a bathroom. Not mine. The wallpaper was different, the fixtures were wrong. There was a toothbrush on the sink in a color I'd never buy. I slammed it shut, tried again, this time, a bedroom. A child's bedroom with toys I remembered from my childhood but arranged in a room I'd never seen. "Stop it," I whispered. Then louder. "Stop it." The door symphony quieted. Not stopped, but hushed. Like a crowd lowering their voices when someone important walks in. That's when I heard her voice. "Sarah, honey, is that you?" Grandma's voice, coming from the cube of doors in the center of that vast space. I know I shouldn't have walked toward it. Every horror movie, every scary story, every instinct screamed at me to find a way out. Any way out. But it was Grandma's voice. And I was so tired, so scared, so alone. The grass was soft under my feet when the floor changed. Real grass, with that fresh-cut smell, then cold tile, then carpet so plush I nearly tripped. Each surface transition happened exactly at my footfall, like the room was anticipating where I'd step. "I've been waiting for you," Grandma's voice said. Closer now. I wanted to explain, but I ran out of time. This house, it's special, Sarah. It's been in our family for generations. I reached the cube of doors. Up close, I could see that each one was unique. Brass handles, crystal knobs, sliding panels, even what looked like airlock doors. Some were tiny, like dollhouse doors. Others were enormous, like cathedral entrances. "Grandma," I called out, "where are you?" "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm always here. The house keeps us, all of us. Every Chen woman who's lived here, we become part of it." One of the doors in the cube opened. Just a crack. Just enough to see inside. I saw my grandmother, but also I didn't. She was younger, older, standing, sitting, wearing the dress she was buried in, wearing jeans I'd never seen her own. She was one person and many people, all at once, like looking at someone through a shattered mirror where each piece showed a different version. "The house needs a caretaker," all the versions of her said in unison. "Someone to manage the doors, to keep the connections stable, to make sure nothing gets through that shouldn't." Gets through? My voice was barely a whisper. What could get through? But even as I asked, I thought I knew. Because in the spaces between the floating doors above us, in the dark that wasn't quite dark, I could see shapes moving. Things that weren't quite human, weren't quite anything. Just wrong. Pressing against the barriers between here and there. Between real and not real. "I'm so sorry, honey," Grandma said. And she did look sorry. All of her versions did. "I wanted to tell you, but the house chooses when. It always has. My mother tried to warn me, but I didn't understand until I was standing where you are now." The door opened wider. Inside the cube, I could see more clearly. It wasn't just Grandma. There were others. Women I recognized from old family photos. My great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. Others whose faces I didn't know, but whose eyes, those Chen eyes, looked exactly like mine. "Join us," they said. Not in unison this time, but overlapping, like a round song. "Take your place. Keep the doors. Guard the thresholds. Protect the world from what lies beyond." I stepped back. The floor beneath me shifted. Wood to stone to something that felt like glass. "I can't," I said. This is insane. I just wanted a house, a normal house, a normal life." "There is no normal anymore," Grandma said sadly. "The moment you inherited this house, normal ended. You can't leave, Sarah. You've already discovered that. The house won't let you. Because without a caretaker, without someone to manage the connections, everything collapses. Every door, everywhere, could open onto anywhere. The barriers would fall. The things waiting in the between spaces would pour through." I thought about every door I'd walked through in the past 3 weeks. Every impossible connection. Every wrong turn that led to the right place or the right turn that led to the wrong place. Was I already doing it? Already managing the doors without realizing it? "How long?" I asked. "How long would I have to?" "Forever," they all said. "Or until you pass the house to the next generation. The next Chen woman. That's how it's always been." I looked up at the floating doors above us. Watched them slowly rotating, drifting, occasionally bumping into each other with soft wooden sounds. Each one a connection, a possibility, a danger. What if I say no? The silence that followed was answer enough. I ran, not back the way I came. That door was gone, replaced by a solid wall that felt like every surface at once. I ran toward the edge of that impossible space, where the floor dissolved into something that wasn't quite mist, wasn't quite static, wasn't quite anything my brain could process. Behind me, I heard the doors in the cube opening. All of them. And footsteps. So many footsteps. Following me, not running, walking, patient, inevitable. "You can't escape your blood, Sarah," Grandma's voice called. But it wasn't just her voice anymore. It was layered with all the others. Generations of Chen women who had stood where I stood. Chosen what I had to choose. I reached the edge and almost fell into nothing. The floor just stopped. Beyond it was a drop that my eyes couldn't follow. Not down, not up, just away, into spaces that shouldn't exist. That's when I saw them clearly. The things in the between spaces. They weren't monsters exactly. They were worse. They were possibilities. Could be's and might have beens and never were's. Things that existed in the gaps between one door and another, feeding on the inconsistencies, growing stronger every time a connection went wrong. One of them turned toward me. I say turned, but it didn't have a face, didn't have a form. It was just attention, focused on me, hungry. "They know you now," my great-grandmother's voice said from behind me. She was closer than the others, moving faster. "They can smell the doorkeeper blood in you. If you don't take your place, they'll follow you, through every door, every threshold, until there's nowhere left to run." I looked back. The cube of doors was opening like a flower, like a mouth. Inside, the generations of Chen women stood waiting, patient, eternal, trapped. "There has to be another way," I said. "There is," Grandma said. Just Grandma now, stepping forward from the group, looking exactly as I remembered her from my childhood. Soft eyes, silver hair, hands that always smelled like flower and lavender. "But you won't like it." She gestured to the floating doors above us. "Each door is a choice someone made, a path between here and there. The house collects them, keeps them, but it can only hold so many. When a doorkeeper dies without passing on the responsibility, the oldest doors start to fail, the connections break down, things slip through. So what's the other way?" "Close them all," she said simply. "Every door, every connection, lock the house completely, nothing in, nothing out. The things in the between spaces will starve, the doors will seal, the house will become just a house again." "But," I looked at the women behind her, "my family, generations of them." "But we'll be sealed inside," she finished. "All of us, forever. No passing on, no next generation. The Chen line ends with you, and we remain, trapped in a house with no exits." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Megan. "Hey, haven't heard from you in days, getting worried, coming over tomorrow if you don't respond." Tomorrow. The outside world, friends, life, all of it waiting beyond doors I couldn't trust. I looked at the thing in the between space. It had moved closer while I was distracted. Not moved, existed closer. Like it was skipping the space between there and here. "How?" I asked. "How do I close them all?" Grandma smiled. That sad, knowing smile she used to give me when I asked why Grandpa had to die, why good things ended, why life hurt. "You know how," she said. "You've always known. It's in your blood, in your bones. The house recognized you the moment you walked in. That's why it started showing you the truth. You just have to choose." I closed my eyes, felt for it. That thing I'd been trying to ignore since the first impossible door. The pull, the connection, like invisible threads stretching from me to every threshold in the house, to every door floating above us, to every possibility and path and portal. When I opened my eyes, I could see them. The threads, golden and silver and colors that didn't have names. Thousands of them, millions, all connected to me, all waiting for my choice. "If I seal them," I said, "you'll all be trapped. Forever. That's not fair." "Fair," my great-great-grandmother laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh, just tired. "Child, we gave up on fair the moment we walked through that first wrong door. We've had our time, our choices. Now it's yours." I thought about Megan, about my life in Chicago, about the future I'd planned. Marriage, maybe. Kids, definitely. A normal life in a normal house where doors led where they were supposed to lead. But I also thought about those things in the between spaces, about what would happen if they got through, If every door everywhere became a potential portal for things that shouldn't exist. Will it hurt? I asked. Everything important hurts, Grandma said. I reached out with my mind, felt along those threads, found the ones connected to the floating doors, and pulled. The sound was indescribable, like a symphony playing backwards, like glass chimes in a hurricane. Every door above us slammed shut at once. The boom of it knocked me to my knees. More threads. The doors in the cube pull, slam, the sound of wood splintering, metal bending, stone cracking. The Chen women didn't fight, didn't run. They stood together, hands linked, watching me with eyes that held 100 years of understanding. "We're proud of you," they said in unison. More threads. The doors I couldn't see. The ones hidden in corners of the house I'd never explored. In rooms that only existed at 333. In spaces between spaces. Pull, pull, pull. Each one felt like tearing off a piece of myself. Because that's what they were. Pieces of possibility, parts of the me that could have been if I'd chosen differently. The things in the between spaces screamed. Not with voices, with existence itself. They thrashed against the closing barriers, clawed at the shrinking gaps. But it was too late. I was closing it all. Every door, every connection, every choice. The last thread was the hardest. The door I'd come through. The innocent vacuum closet that had led me here. If I closed it, if I sealed it. "Do it," Grandma said. "Finish what you started." I pulled. The world exploded into darkness. I woke up in my bedroom. My normal bedroom, in my normal house, with normal doors that led to normal rooms. For a moment, I thought I dreamed it all. The stress of moving, the grief of losing Grandma, my mind playing tricks. Then I tried to open my bedroom door. It wouldn't budge. Not locked, not stuck, just not. Like the concept of open no longer applied to it. I tried the windows. Same thing, they were there. I could see through them, but they wouldn't open. Couldn't open. The very idea of them opening felt wrong. Like trying to make water flow upward. My phone worked, sort of. I could receive texts, calls. But when I tried to respond, the words wouldn't send. When I tried to dial out, the numbers wouldn't connect. I've been here for I don't know how long. Time moves strangely when you can't leave a room. My phone says it's been 3 hours. My laptop says it's been 3 days. The clock on my nightstand still reads 3:33. I can hear them sometimes. My family, the Chen women, moving through the house, taking care of things, keeping watch, making sure nothing gets through, and nothing has. No doors open onto impossible rooms, no connections lead to places they shouldn't. The house is sealed, safe, a prison and a protection all at once. Megan texts me every day, worried messages that I can read but not answer. She says she's come by, knocked, called out, but from inside I hear nothing. I see no one. The house keeps its secrets now. I'm not hungry, not thirsty, not tired, just here. Forever here. The last Chen woman. The one who chose to close the doors. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. If trapping generations of my family was worth protecting the world from things that might never have gotten through anyway. But then I remember that creature in the between space. The hunger in its non-eyes. The wrongness of its attention. And I know I made the only choice I could. The doors stay closed. If you're listening to this, if somehow this recording found its way to you, then maybe the seal isn't perfect. Maybe there's still a crack, a gap, a possibility. Check your doors, all of them. Make sure they lead where they're supposed to lead. Make sure nothing's coming through that shouldn't. And if you ever inherit a house, an old house with too many doors, maybe think twice, maybe walk away, maybe, wait, do you hear that? It sounds like knocking. But I'm alone in here. I'm always alone in here, and nothing can get through. I made sure of that. I closed everything, didn't I? The knocking's getting louder, and it's not coming from my bedroom door. It's coming from inside my closet. From a door I didn't know was there. A door that shouldn't exist. A door that can't exist because I closed them all. But it's there. I can see it now, small, painted white, with a crystal knob that catches the light from nowhere. It's opening. And I can hear my grandmother's voice, but it's different. Wrong. Like it's being spoken backwards through water. Every door closes, she's saying, but every closing is just another kind of opening. The knob is turning. I should be scared, terrified, but I'm not because I just realized something. I never counted the doors in my bedroom, never included them in my 17, which means, oh no, the door's open now, and behind it. Did you make it this far? Are you still listening? Good, because I need to know how many doors are in your house. Have you counted them? Really counted them? Every closet, every cabinet, even the ones you've forgotten about? Leave a comment below, tell me your number, and if it's 17, or if you've noticed any door leading somewhere it shouldn't. We need to talk. Subscribe if you want to hear what happened next. Because this story, it's not over. It can't be over. Not when there are still so many doors left to open. And remember, some doors are meant to stay closed, but some closings are just another kind of opening. Sleep tight.